Sweet. So close. Let's turn it down just slowly, down to 30%. All right. How close am I? Let's see. 40 or 45. Crystal vision, crystal vision. Can see crystal vision. Can see. Got me in the way, easy on the way as I go see, as I go to see. 25. As I go to see. Way down, you know, in my folk soul, traveling on the sea. Choose your way on the wave. No matter where you go, ancient is the way. Ancient is the way, oh, no matter where you go, ancient is the way. Read marathon tour here. Let's see. Ooh, almost midway, not quite. Okay. Now, if you remember, I read down. Okay. So I'll start here on page 101. Just down from the first short paragraph. Or how about I just start? Yeah, okay. That's fine. I shall start again. The tower of glass. 'Twas that thing of his dreams, thrust up from the sea like a polished crystal spire, the facets of its sides sheer to the top, confounded by the sight of it. Lou stared while the boat sailed on in the wake of the Famore craft, directly toward the gleaming structure. Lou, what's the matter? Ein asked, noting his stricken look. I've seen that tower before, he answered, his voice barely more than a whisper, as if it were some sacred thing he beheld. Gilla looked sharply round him. Seen it? Where? In my dreams, Lou said vaguely, uncertain how to explain it. Have you been here before? Gila asked. Not that I remember. Suddenly angry, Lou shook his head. I don't know, and it's driving me mad. He glared up with new certainty at the tower. But I do know one thing. If that ship is going there, it's obviously doubly certain that I'm going there too. Well, no fears of missing that pleasure, Gila said brightly. Your ship's headed in right now. Do either of you know anything of this place yourselves? Lou asked his companions. Ain shook her head. I told you, lad, it's only for more who come here. No one else has ever returned alive. Gila reminded him, then, we'll have to be the first, Lou said fiercely. Fine, lad, Gila agreed. But I don't think we should just sail in and present ourselves, do ya? Sanity. If I had any myself, would suggest that we look this place over before plugging in. The clown's reasoning brought a sense of reality back to Lou. They broke off their trial in the other vessel's wake to make a wide circle about the tower. They saw that it sat firmly upon a high base that seemed made of stone embedded in the living rock of a tiny island. The barren, rugged land of it extended out only a little way beyond the base and then dropped off abruptly to the water. After completing a circuit, Lou eased the small boat in behind the island, opposite the point of the Fomor's ship had been making for. There was no sign of life on the ragged coast, and they came in closer, easing round a tiny crooked finger of rocks into a sheltered spot. There, the shore seemed to offer a safe landing. The day was calm, and they had no trouble working the boat in and tying it up. All three then looked over the island and the tower with painstaking care. Have we gotten in unseen, do you think? Gila asked uncertainly. No way to tell, said Lou, lifting his eyes to the structure that now loomed right above them. It was silent. No movement was visible on or in it. As Lou examined it more closely, more of its structure became clear to him. The polished planes of glass were seen to be not a single sheet, but many, separate, interlocking diamonds, whose sides were the length of several men. They were joined by a slender black line crisscrossing to form a web across each polished face. From Lou's low angle, this surface now reflected the sky and drifting clouds above so perfectly that the tower might have become part of the brilliant scene, save for the network of lines. So it kind of cloaks through reflection. It made the tower seem as if it meant to entrap a segment of the clouds in a gigantic net instead of joining with them to be one. To Lou, the tower was at once a thing of awesome beauty and of icy terror, for it was so alien, so starkly separate from the natural world surrounding it that he felt there could be nothing of human warmth in it. There's no way into it, Gila observed. It was true. Lou realized no openings marred the smooth surface or the blank stone foundation. That Fomor ship had to go ashore to unload somewhere. Ain offered. There must be a way in there. Let's go and find out, said Lou. And hope no one finds this boat while we're away, she added, fastening her long cloak back around her shoulders. My girl, why worry? Gila said blithely. Since they're likely going to catch us and kill us, we won't be needing it. She threw him a look of annoyance and then turned to clamber from the boat onto the rocky shore. The others were close behind. Cautiously they worked their way round the island. It was a rough journey, but they finally found themselves peering past a rocky outcrop into a tiny cove. There the sea washed almost at the base of the tower's foundations, and there were several immense square openings into the thick stone wall. Before these openings was a system of wharves, WHRBES, apparently of stone, reaching far out into the waters of the cove. The ship they had followed was tied at one of these wharves, and men were already at work offloading. The cargo by means that, to the invaders, seemed quite miraculous. One strange contrivance with a long neck of gray metal supported a complex pulley system that somehow worked without men pulling on the ropes. So it's probably weighted, right? It lifted or magical, never know. Lifted cargo from the ship with a great deal of snuffling and shrill screams as if it were some aged beast in pain. Offloaded cargo was set on a sort of raised pathway that ran from the wharf through one of the doorways, disappearing into the darkness beneath the tower. The cargo began to move at once, all by itself, propelled along the path by some unseen force. Lou was not at first able to observe these wonders. His attention was riveted on other ships drawn up at the wharves, and on the men who moved about them. The ships were long and slender and shining black, and the men about them wore tunics and trousers of a metallic gray. Those men destroyed my home. This burst from Lou before he thought. Quiet, Gila hissed, glancing up apprehensively at the glinting wall of glass looming above them. No telling what kind of looking they've got mounted here. Lou was already cursing himself for his rashness. He had promised Mananan not to talk his own past. More, he realized that his discovery had not been such a shock. Since seeing the tower, he had been expecting the appearance of the soldiers of his dreams as well. Gila said now in a hushed voice, "Do you know who those men are?" "I've no idea, lad. Friends to the Pomor, though. That's clear enough." "I've never seen ships like those," said Ain. "I have enough," Lou grimly remembered, and now more than ever he had to find out about this place, these men. "I've got to get into that tower." "Trying to get in there is madness," Gila protested. "You know where your high kings come. It's sure death to try to discovering more. Come away now, and you'll have tales enough for your grandchildren and a chance to have them." "Please, Gila," Lou said earnestly. "I've other reasons now. I can't explain for having to go in." Gila shook his head. "I don't know, lad," he said doubtfully. "Seems to me that you're staying alive and seeing through the mission you're on is what you should be thinking of. Gila, believe me, finishing that mission may depend on going inside." Gila considered that. Then he shrugged and said with resignation, "You may be right, lad. Not even your sea god can know the way a destiny will work itself out. Maybe this is something you're meant to do." He lifted up a long finger to point purposefully at Lou. "But don't you be thinking that you'll leave old Gila out of this. He looked up at the tower, and delight with a delighted grin flashed into being again. Might just be a bit of fun seeing the inside of that great icicle, so it might. Lou looked at Ain. You can stay and watch the boat. Ha! Who are you? Who are you to give me orders? She shot back haughtily. I'm charged with manning on to see through this mission as you are. No dangers in that place could match his wrath if I fail him. She added in an aside to Gila. He's got an awful cruel temper, you know. Not an entirely sane man at all. Gila nodded sympathetically at that. Lou sighed his resignation. All right, he added. We'll go in, but how would you suggest? The most direct way Gila suggested. All these men are busy about the ship. Seems to me we could slip through that doorway nearest the rocks without being seen. The other two agreed. They worked their way round the shore of the cove without much difficulty, the rocks giving them cover. As they passed close to the strange warships, Lou saw that they were not so sleekly black as they seemed at a distance. It appeared to the lad that the sides were formed of great sheets of metal and riveted one to another, much as the smiths who had trained him had riveted bronze decorative fittings. These sheets were iron, he guessed, because they were rustling along the seams and spots, trailing streaks of red-brown to the water like great bleeding wounds. Wondered what kinds of forces he could have forged and shaped iron in such huge pieces. So it's like armor. Finally, they reached a spot near the closest doorway. Far down the wharves, the men were busy still. The way to the unguarded door seemed clear. Well, nothing but to try it, Gila said. Moved from their covers, slipped to the opening and through. The others quickly followed his lead. As he came into the tower's base, Lou paused with his friends to examine the place they'd entered. The room ahead was like a cavern, extending up into deep shadows away into distant gloom. Clearly, a vast storehouse for the tower, with material of all types piled in great mountains about them. Lou recognized some of the piled objects as loot from Ire, tapestries, carved wood, weapons, utensils, gleaming treasures of silver and gold and bronze. Unbelievable wealth was dumped in careless heaps, left there to molder and rust and tarnish away. To Lou, this raised a curious point. Why hadn't the wealth of the Daytonons been stripped away and brought here for no purpose? There was no time to consider that now. Other shapes in the depths of the room claimed his interest. There were dimly seen bulks of massive size, alien form, unguessable purpose. Some seemed to be vehicles with great metal wheels, but of such enormous weight that scores of oxen would be needed to move them. Most had clearly been stored there, unused for a very long time. The dust of many years was thick on them, and they were scarred by the red corruption that marked the ships outside. So Lou examined them more unanswerable. Questions flooded his mind. The three moved cautiously on through the towering piles of objects, keeping a careful watch, but they saw no other of the soldiers. They moved farther into the room and then stopped, listening. For there in the room's center, they were aware of a sound that seemed to rise all about them. It was a rumble as of the distant thunder, but continuous, a throbbing and intertwined with it, a high, thin hum, like the sustained note of a harp string. It's as if the tower is alive, Gila whispered, voicing all their hearts, all their thoughts, hearts beating, breathing, and we in its bowels. There's a pretty thought, Ain replied sourly. She looked round. Where do we go now? I've seen nothing of those men. They must have gone into the upper part of the tower, said Lou. There have to be ways up into it. Let's find the outer wall and follow it round. There'll be stairs somewhere, won't there? Gila shrugged. But in a place like this, there's no way to be certain of anything. They found a way through the piles of goods to an outer wall. It was of the strange stone-like material, smooth and apparently jointless. As they felt their way along, Lou in the lead, the clown trailed a few paces behind, searching constantly round him, his expressions quizzical. Something was bothering him. Lou came soon upon a hallway, high but narrow passage, leading from the main hall. Let's try down here, he suggested. They moved cautiously down the passage. It was faintly illuminated by glowing yellow squares widely spaced along the ceiling. More magic, Lou thought. Somewhere ahead, the passage seemed to enter another room, opening into a darkness that gave no hint as to what it contained. Still, there was no sign of any more. This is strange. Very strange, said Gila, in a voice tinged with uncharacteristic worry. We've come too far too easily. I don't like this passage. The way it feels or smells, something is wrong. Gila, quit your raving, Lou told him. Nothing is wrong. Sharp rattling sound began behind them. Whirled about to see a door of iron dropping from the ceiling, clanging to the floor, closing up the entrance to the passageway. There you are, I told you, Gila said with an odd, triumphant note. It doesn't mean anything, Lou protested. We're still safe. A sudden harsh screeching rose about them, and with a violent initial jerk, the floor began to move. Lou realized they were on a moving pathway like the one he had noticed on the wharf. Went from wall to wall, leaving no way to get off, and it was now carrying them off rapidly toward the black opening of the passage's far end. Don't go through the doorway, Lou cried. Hang on, Surface offered. Let's see. Hang on. In there. Fine. He grabbed at the wall to hold himself back, but the stone surface offered no place to grip. He fell backwards and was pulled feet first along, scrabbling madly at the wall to slow himself. Behind him, Ain was down too, fighting vainly to pull herself back. They succeeded in slowing themselves, but the moving floor still dragged them toward the opening. The hapless Gila had no chance at all. He had been taken off his feet by the first jerk and dumped in a heap. He could do nothing to slow himself as the floor whisked him along. Gila, Lou cried helplessly, but the clown, a tangled pile of limbs, could only wave weakly as he was launched through the doorway, vanishing into the darkness. Lou and Ain redoubled their own frantic efforts to hang on, but it was useless. The belt dragged them relentlessly on. And Lou soon followed Gila through the opening. There was no floor beyond it. As he went off the end of the moving walkway, he flailed out. One hand contacted a projecting rail, and he gripped it as he fell. The swinging down inches from his face was a spinning metal wheel, over which the moving floor somehow rolled. Turning back to run beneath the upper surface, he hung by a brace, which held this projecting end of the walkway and the wheel. He had no chance then to see what was beneath him, for Ain, fighting stubbornly to the very end, was at last forcibly cast over the edge. As she fell, he reached out with his free hand and caught her by one arm, her dead weight yanking on him violently, nearly pulling him loose. But he held on, and they both hung there, all their weight on the one hand desperately gripping the rail. He looked round. There was nothing round or below but a dull gray metal surface that funneled down to a round opening some distance below. It was like the gaping maw of some monstrous beast waiting to swallow them, and its chill, sour-smelling breath rose up to envelop them. Lou saw no place to put foot or hand, no chance to climb back up, no place to climb to, and his hand was rapidly losing its grip on the brace. There was only one other choice, and he took it. He let go. Okay, that is the end. The next one is Chapter 14, A Cold Reception, and that's where I break. Thank you. All right. We're on page 107. Not quite half, but, close. So... deep into the tower, into the unknown, like a black hole, you don't know what's on the other side. Hold on, hold on, true love, heart of a hero, B-I-O. Hold on, You know it is time to have a break, baby. Ooh, yeah. Wow. Lots of reading. Marathon. All right. Have a great night. Circle around.